Okay, I have a 2007 Pontiac Vibe here, and we're going to be removing the CV axle here on the driver's side today. Now, there could be a couple situations. If your CV axle is bad, you might hear a clicking, popping noise when you're turning. Another reason you may have to take it out is if you're having some leakage around the output shaft seal or the CV axle seal down there. So we're just going to go ahead and get started lifting the vehicle and getting some jack stands here first. Okay, you'll notice the tilt that I have on here, and this is going to minimize the transmission fluid that I'm going to lose. So I've got it tilted at a pretty decent angle, and we've just got a jack stand. We're going to leave this jack in place as well, and make sure to break these all loose if you're not using an impact before you go to lifting the vehicle up. The first thing we got to do is take these off, and then we'll get on the lugs. Okay, so the plastic lugs are 21 millimeters, and once you have those loosened, it just comes right off. They just thread right onto there. And so now that we've got those off, I'm going to get my impact and break these 21 millimeters loose. And of course, if you have the 17-inch alloys, you'll just have the lugs and then remove your wheel. So I've got all those lugs loose, and we're ready to go ahead and pull the wheel off here. Okay, before we go any farther, you'll note this axle nut has an indentation right there. We're going to need to get a punch or a screwdriver or something and knock that back out a little bit. That's actually locking that onto the CV axle. So we're going to go ahead and get a punch and a hammer, and we're going to knock that indentation back outwards. Okay, so just took a little punch that you can get pretty much anywhere, put it in that slot, and hit that really good and knock that back out with a hammer. And we've got it knocked out enough that we can get our socket on here now. Okay, now I probably should have mentioned this early. Before you start this job, make sure that you have a 30 millimeter and it is a 12-sided. You're going to need a 30 millimeter 12-sided socket or axle socket to get this loose. Now this is a 1/2-inch drive, and what I've done is I got a loaner tool from AutoZone, and it's just got a whole bunch of sizes. Now like I said, just make sure you have this. If you don't have this, then you're going to be having to go and buy one, but it's a 30 millimeter or 1 3/16 is the equivalent, but one of those you'll need. So what I was using was my impact, but if you don't have an impact, if you've got a breaker bar, what I found that works really well is just get on here with your breaker bar and then take a heavy rubber mallet and whack this thing. A good way to break it loose, or get you a big cheater pipe. And if it's really tight, you could have somebody stand on the brakes, or you could go ahead and put the tire on and lower it back down and have the weight. Putting the tire on and lowering it back down is the best way, so you're not turning anything, but it will work holding the brakes too. But any of those methods, like I said, I just use my impact. But if it's really tight, you want to get you a cheater bar and something like this, or you can use a rubber mallet to whack this thing. And so we've already got it loose, and we're just going to go ahead and finish taking this completely off. Now this will be really tight, and put a little penetrating oil on there as well. We're going to go ahead and just get that completely out of our way, and then we're going to move on here. Okay, so I went ahead and turned the wheel to the left, and what we're going to do now is get back here on this bracket. We've got a couple of 15 millimeters. We got one down here at the bottom. Now, you'll notice that this bolt's kind of in the way here. So we're going to go ahead and get this bottom bolt holding the bracket first. And just get you a breaker bar. These will be really tight. And we'll go ahead and break this loose. And then I'll show you what we're going to do next. Okay, so we have the bottom one completely loose. We're just going to leave that there for a moment. Now I'm going to go ahead and focus my tension up here. I've got a couple of nuts on this side. Now we're going to need to also hold the bolt on the back side. So we're going to go ahead and get our socket and a wrench on there. Okay, so you're going to need a 22 to get on the nut on this side. And if you don't have a 22 millimeter wrench, you can use a 7/8. You're just holding this side over here from turning. So we just sticking that on there. We'll hold that. And I'm just going to get on here with my impact, but you can use a breaker bar with an extension or whatever. Okay, and I can forewarn you, if you're going to be breaking these loose by hand, you're going to need a breaker bar and a long cheater pipe. This stuff is going to be really tight. Okay, so I just got the nut off of that bottom bolt, and we're just going to slide that out. And now we can go ahead and get back here with our 15, and we got plenty of room. Now, if I wasn't removing this knuckle, I wouldn't go ahead and do that, but I'm removing this from the knuckle anyways. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that out. It's just going to make it easier without having to get in there with a shorter wrench or anything. Okay, this is my setup for the top one. It's a little short extension, and just taking that top bolt out. And with this out, this caliper will be completely loose here, but at this point we're going to get some wire. We're going to wire it up here so it won't be dangling. So I'm going to go ahead and get some wire and hook through here, and we'll pull it on off. Okay, so we just run some wire through here and looped it, and now this will just wiggle right off. Just give it a little wiggle and it should come off. The pressure's too much, you may have to push your piston back. Get in here with a screwdriver and push it over just a little bit. If it tries to hang up, you just come right in through here and just push that piston back just a little bit if it tries to hang up on you. We're just going to fasten it right up here. Okay, so we've just got that wired safely up out of the way onto that spring, and this rotor will just come right off. I'm just going to set it aside just so it's not falling off on us. And now we're just going to go ahead and get this 22. So just get your wrench back on here. In this case I'm using a 7/8. We'll get our 22 and we'll finish taking that nut off right there. Okay, and these are coming out real easy. Okay, now with that loose, we're going to go ahead at this point and straighten our wheel back up, and then we're just going to pop this out of here. It should just pull right down. Okay, and with that straight, it'll just pull right out of there. This is completely loose. And now you want to be careful and don't be yanking on your CV axle a whole lot at this point. What we're going to do is push it back through. If you hadn't already, make sure you put some spray lubricant on there. It's going to make it easier. Now, a lot of times these will stick a little bit, and you'll have to take your mallet and give it a little hit and maybe get a little something on there to kind of push it back through. But usually you can just push them right back out. And you also, if it's not stuck, just get back here and take your pry bar and just gently pull it back out there. So you just don't want to pull on this a whole lot and pop the CV axle out of its socket up there. Unless, of course, it's completely ruined and the purpose is to replace it, then it won't make any difference. But like I said, if you were taking it out to get it out of your way or fixing the CV axle seal leak, then you want to be cautious, and you also want to be cautious when putting your new one back in. Okay, so we've got it out, completely out of the knuckle now. So now we're going to go ahead and work on getting this up and out of here. Now, to make things easier, we're going to go ahead and remove this plastic flap. We've got some 10 millimeters right here. We're probably going to have maybe another one up in the front. We're going to start with these. Looks like one's missing right there. Okay, so we're just using a little 10 millimeter. We're just going to pop these out so we can get this plastic piece out of our way. Okay, up here in the front, you've just got a couple of these little cheap plastic pop pins that are holding it in. You pop those out, and then we can set that completely out of the way. And it kind of gives us a little more seeing room here now. Okay, now I don't expect I'll lose any fluid because I showed you we have this jacked up and tilted at an angle, but if we do, we got a pan. It's not going to be much. Alright, so you can see we got this completely out. The only thing that's holding it is the clip that's actually going in, clipping it into the transmission at this point. That end is clipped in. Now what I have here is just an ordinary everyday crowbar, and what we're going to do is we're going to get back in here on this. It's a long crowbar, and we're going to go right back in here. And they do have a tool, a loaner tool you can get as well, but so far I have yet to find a CV axle that this crowbar wouldn't pop out. Now you want to be careful at this point. You know, you may put you some rags on you, you know, if you're you don't want to mess your threads up here if you're having to reuse this. But what I'm going to do, you can see where the CV axle is prying against that. You can see where I've got it located just below that bracket right there, and I've got it in behind the CV axle, and you have to kind of hold it there. It won't just go there on its own. And we're just going to rock this thing, and it's not just going to pop out easily. You're going to have to rock it a little bit and give it some pretty good tugs, but it will come loose. And let's see if I can do this one-handed at all. Okay, see, I'm not on there real good. Let me get my other hand set this up a little better. Like I said, I'm just rocking it and giving it some good tugs. It's got to be in behind it. And it's just about to come loose here. It's hard to do it with one hand because I kind of need to hold this thing on there a little bit better because it's trying to slip off of the back of it, so I kind of need my other hand on it. So give me just 1 second. Okay, so there we go. I had to rock it about 3 or 4 times, but it did come loose. And now it's ready just to come out of here. And there she is. And you can see that it just has this clip right here. That's all that's snapping that in there. But you know, don't underestimate it. It really holds it because it's a snug fit. And then there's the seal there. Now, a lot of times, you know, yours may be okay, but if you're having any leakage around this CV axle, make sure you replace that seal right there. And you also have to specify either drivers or passenger. The seals are different from one side to the other, but they're really cheap. They're only like $7. You can get them at any part store. And it's up to you, but it's not a bad idea. Just pry it out with a screwdriver and just pop you a new one in. Just kind of lightly tap it in with a rubber mallet. This one actually looks okay. Okay, and you'll notice that we didn't lose any fluid, any transmission fluid whatsoever. Okay, so when you get your replacement, you're just going to go right back through here, just like we took it out. Get it right straight into there. And once you have it set in there, what we're going to do is we're going to like hold it up like so once it's lined up. And then we're going to take our heavy shot-filled rubber mallet and we're going to hit the end here. Now you don't want to hit this with a regular hammer because you're going to ruin the threads on the end. Now I guess you could put your axle nut on and carefully hit it that way, but I definitely recommend getting you a heavy shot-filled rubber mallet for this, because we're going to hold it just like this, and it's not just going to go back in with a few light hits. You're going to have to hit this a little bit and knock it right back into place where it'll seat on that clip. And you'll know when you get it back in there. You can see how far it's setting out right now. So we got a good little bit to hit it. So I'm going to free up my hand here and start hitting on this. Okay, so there we go. It took like 3 hits and it went right back into place. And you can look back here and you can confirm that you have this thing seated properly. So now after we get that, so we're just going to make sure that we got it completely seated, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to slip it back into here. Now I would recommend putting some grease, or at the very least like some anti-seize on this, because sometimes these really want to rust into these bearings and don't want to come out. So I would recommend that. Okay, so we just slipped that back in there, nothing to it. Now we're just going to take this and slip it right back up into this strut, and then we'll work our top bolt in. Remember, leave the bottom one out temporarily. Just going to make it easier for you to get your brake caliper back on. Okay, so we just turned the wheel back to the left, got our top bolt in, it's not tightened, and we're just getting ready to get our rotor set on here. And then we're going to go ahead and place our brake caliper back in front of these and get our bolts into that. Okay, so I'm just lining up the bolts into the brake caliper. You got to kind of hold this thing and tilt it a certain way to get your bolts to line up. You don't want to get it cross-threaded. And we're just going to hand tighten them. We just said slip this back over the rotor. And I'm just going to hand tighten them, and then we'll go about torquing them down. And then we'll also get the other bolt in here after we torque this caliper down here. Okay, these are getting torqued to 162 foot-pounds. The bolts holding the bracket to the knuckle are 79 foot-pounds. And we're going to be tightening, once we straighten up the wheel, we're going to tighten this to 118 foot-pounds. If you're reusing the old axle nut, which you can, just make sure that you crimp and knock that back into that little divot after you get it torqued down. We're going to torque it after we get the tire and get it lowered to the ground though. Okay, we've just straightened up the tire, and we're just taking our 30 millimeter 12 star and snugging this down. We're not going to be really tightening. We're just going to snug it as best that we can by hand before we slip the wheel on. Okay, at this point you'll want to go ahead and slip your cover back on. We've got a couple bolts here that we need to refit fastened. Okay, so under the front here, we've got a snap here. We got a little snap right down here that we need to snap back into place. Sometimes these will break on you. You just have to get some more. They're very brittle as they get old. Okay, so at this point we're just going to get our wheel back on here, and then we'll go ahead and start working on snugging our lugs down a little bit. Okay, so we just got the lugs snugged down. We're ready to remove our jack stand and get our jack out from under here. Okay, I went ahead and tightened the lugs to 100 foot-pounds, and we've tightened this axle nut to 118 foot-pounds. And now I'm just getting ready to re-punch the axle nut into the little slot there. Okay, so all I've done is took this punch and I got under here with my hammer, and I just took and hit that and whacked it a couple good times and indented that, and we're ready to go ahead at this point and just put our wheel cover back on. And just make sure you got your slot for your valve stem in the right spot there. Okay, so that's going to conclude this video for replacing the driver's side CV axle. And if you found it helpful, please give it a like and please share. And as always, I invite you to subscribe, and I thank y'all for watching.